And in 2019, we released the first innovation and technology master plan for Lagos that was based on 4 major pillars, so infrastructure, data access, funding, and talent.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Moonshot by TechCabal.
The story doesn't often get told of how the government's thinking around policy has helped technology and technology startups move forward a bit. So we're going to be having this conversation. I'm going to let Mr. Tubosun introduce himself for a minute or so.
Okay, thank you very much, Muiwa. So my name is Tubosun Alake. I'm the Commissioner for Innovation, Science and Technology in Lagos. And my portfolio is really to deal with technology infrastructure in Lagos and also with the innovation ecosystem. How do we turbocharge that for increased growth? And how do we make sure that there's increasing interest in the ecosystem globally? So that's, in a nutshell, my daily job.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to start from a conversation we're having backstage, where you talked about how Lagos moved from this cluster of small startups in Yaba to this point, right? How did the government think about it? How did government's thinking around policy help that happen? And how will you also measure where the government is thinking about it today?
Okay, so I think, I hear a lot about how, look, the ecosystem got here without government. They are blocking our moves everywhere we turn. They just ban this and ban that. But I think that particular narrative clouds the actual truth. So I think it was in 2011 or 2012. So the Lagos State Infrastructure Management Agency and Main One came together. Part of that partnership was in driving infrastructure connectivity in Yaba. So Yaba today, as we know, is like the home of startups in Lagos. And so that partnership led to the first fiber optic cable that started delivering high-capacity connectivity to that area. And from that partnership came the mushrooming of different startups, because Yaba was one of the first places to get that kind of connectivity. And so because of that partnership, that led to, the likes of the Andelas and all the other companies that's situated in that area. And so government was, right from the very beginning, part of what was enabling that growth. And, fast forward even years later, today as we speak, Lagos is the biggest funder of startups in the country. There is no state in Nigeria that funds startups as much as Lagos. That's number 2. Number 3, Lagos State is the biggest funder of R&D in universities, right? Lagos State funds R&D across its major universities, so Unilag, Lagos State University, Yaba College of Technology, and Lagos State University of Science and Technology in Ikorodu. And those R&D projects range from, research in biodiesel, in circular economy things. And so, we take a long-term view as to how to enable the ecosystem. Perhaps the story is not told very well. And I think that's really on government, because that narrative seems to not be in play at all. So, like I said, it's really Lagos, and that's part of the reason, because if government was really hostile to technology startups, I don't think there would have been space for any growth. But in a sense, that's what has been happening.
All right, thank you. Something else I think we spoke about just briefly backstage is, if you think about the fact that many startups now are taking bets on cities outside of Lagos. I think 2 years ago, Ulessin talked a bit about moving to Jos. You see people who work in tech as well saying, let's try other cities, right? Sometimes people say we need healthy competition among cities. We need other cities to become tech hubs as well. So how does Lagos intend to keep being, would I say the epicenter? Would I say the leader? How's Lagos thinking about it for the future?
Right. So I think the success of Lagos, of course, is mainly down to its talent and the talented people in this room and outside. But it's no accident that at least if you are thinking of starting a company, Lagos is really where, in a sense, that you'll first think about because of infrastructure, proximity to markets, the availability of different things, the talent pool, and all of that. And so there are many things that we are doing now and in the pipeline to sustain that. For instance, we are driving one of the biggest infrastructure projects for a state. That's our fiber optic project. I'm sure as people have gone around the city, you've been seeing some multicolored ducts coming out of the ground. So that's our project. What are we trying to do? Spread fiber across the entire city, right? And not just government fiber, but how do we allow MTN, Airtel, 9Mobile, and all those other companies, how do we incentivize them to spread more infrastructure to you? And that's what those multicolored ducts are about, really helping them to reduce their cost of deployment so that internet is more spread out and, cheaper for citizens as well. So there are long-term infrastructure plays today that Lagos is doing to make it easier to sustain the growth. And of course, like I said earlier, we also fund startups, right? Today, if I mention companies like Price Pally, I'm sure some people know about Price Pally. We funded Price Pally. Price Pally got some government money. If I mention Moon Innovations, if I mention, what's Aisha's company? Farms to You. Who else have we funded? A number of startups. If you want some lists, you can go to a website, lasric.lagosstate.gov.ng. You will see some of the startups and some of the R&D projects that we are currently funding as well. So we intend to keep doing that. And how do we also incentivize the private sector? We make sure that it's easier for VCs to fund companies at a base layer. VCs will not touch you unless you have an MVP, you've made some money. But government can incentivize them to go lower. And so starting fund of funds and things like that are also things in the pipeline. Today, we are having our first, so Lagos State also has launched the first public sector venture capital fund. And the cohort 1 actually just completed. There were about 200 or 300 applications. We've narrowed it down to about 15. I think one of the cohorts was also, in the cohort is also 8 medical. I'm sure some people have heard about it. So there's a lot that the government is doing to kind of sustain it. And I could go on, R&D, policy. We are domesticating the startup bill as well. There's a whole lot. So I don't want to bore people, but these are some of the things that the state is doing to sustain that growth.
All right, so let's come below a little bit. Lagos has 2 million kids of school age out of school. So definitely we should be talking a bit about the digital divide and how the government thinks about, in quote, leaving no kid behind. How do we address these gaps?
So I think if you've lived in Lagos for the better part of your life, you will know that migration into Lagos is the highest in the country. And today, while Lagos State schools are free for young people to go to, you keep on having an influx from other states, right? Kids and people from other states migrating. So the pressure on the schools is quite a bit, right? And so there's been efforts at driving digital learning for primary and secondary schools. But I must tell you, it's an extremely expensive endeavor. Just even getting devices alone in the hands of people. Because if you are going to do 1 million devices, let's even say conservatively, at $100, right? That's what? $100 million. $100 million. I mean, today, the entire budget of Lagos is maybe $2.5 billion. And of course, that has to go into roads, hospitals, bridges, and all of that. I would say that the fire department of New York City, the budget of just the fire department is $6.5 billion. The entire Lagos state has 2.5. So there's a lot of balancing that needs to happen across board, right? So there have been digital interventions, right? I think there needs to be more partnerships with the private sector to see how that is sustainably funded and how that can reach to more kids. But, the more kids we are putting in school every day, the more kids are coming from other states that want to also have the experience of going to school and all that. And we just have to keep pressing on that digital skills learning.
Since we're talking about plans and things like that, you mentioned an ICT master plan. Yeah. Yes. So can you talk to us about that as well?
Yeah. So prior to me being commissioner, I was an advisor to the governor on innovation. And in 2019, we released the first innovation and technology master plan for Lagos that was based on 4 major pillars. So infrastructure, data access, funding, and talent, right? And most of the projects that I talked about earlier, our infrastructure project, funding of startups, they all line up under those pillars, right? And so what we've done recently is to upgrade that plan, right? And there'll be a short description coming out in a few days about how we've upgraded that plan and seen all the focus areas that we are driving. So we are going to continually drive infrastructure. We're going to increase. We've done about 2,800 kilometers of fiber across the city. Eventually, we want to get to 6,000. But we are doing 3,000 in the first phase. So we'll soon be done with the first phase of 3,000. We want to increase funding to startups by 100%, right? So what we've done so far, we want to be able to double that. We also want to drive policy. So the startup bill was passed last year, but nothing will effectively happen if states don't pass that bill or if they don't localize that bill, because the states are closer to people than the federal. So how do we localize it, right? We make sure the definitions are really in consonance with what is available on ground. We make sure that the incentives, whether tax incentives, whether permit incentives and all of that, are consistent with what people are getting on the ground. You understand? So policy is a major one. Talent. We were talking earlier. There is no way to solve talent without putting tons of money in it. We just have to invest in talent. There is no how, right? The budget at the federal has to go up. We already spend twice the national average on talent, but we need to do more. We need to put more money. But it's going to be a partnership with the private sector. I mean, there's not enough money to go around. So just like in consonance with the federal, Bosun Tijani, the honorable minister, is doing 3 million tech talents. There's also a contribution we bring to that. My mandate is deep tech. So cloud computing experts, AI, blockchain, and then how do we place them into jobs or help them entrepreneurially. So these are some of the pillars, the initiatives under our pillars. So in the next couple of days, we'll release an upgrade brochure to see what we are doing, where we've reached, and how people can participate.
Where would we be able to find that brochure in the next couple of days?
So we'll put it on a URL, and we'll share it across all social media channels.
All right, we look forward to that. Something else I wanted to ask is around smart cities. There's some conversations around smart cities. Where's Lagos in that conversation?
Okay. So Lagos State in 2020 started a smart city implementation. We started with smart transportation and smart security. So if you've driven around Lagos recently, have you seen video cameras across different junctions? So some of those video cameras, they are called intelligent transport systems. So for people that are violating certain traffic laws, those things take your plate number, right? And when you go and renew your license, your plate license, they will hit you with the fine, right? And so in a way, that's some of the implementations we've been doing to reduce or to make it even hassle-free for you when you are driving your car. It's not every time you want to deal with a last mile official. Let enforcement be automatic. Let it be unbiased and objective. So if you run the red light, just know that you're fine. You'll meet it at the plate number building. Or if your tags expire, right, it's an incentive for you to go and renew. So let's bring some, using technology, some decorum into transportation management. So that's the first implementation. We've done intelligent transport systems in about 500 intelligent video surveillance cameras in criminal hotspots. So areas where there's been a lot of disturbances. These intelligent video cameras, they have facial recognition, and they are also connected to a command and control emergency services that help LASMA, that help emergency services of the states to manage emergency situations. At least if you've noticed, nowadays, when there's an emergency, maybe a truck or something, at least the emergency guys are there quickly. The fire service is there quickly because they've seen it on some video cameras. They've assessed the situation. They are able to deploy. So we've started that implementation. That's the first aspect of Smart City. So there's still many other modules. So there's Smart Health. There's Smart Energy, which for me is pretty exciting. Now that the electricity reform law has been passed, so each state can now generate its own electricity. That's intelligent. You can implement smart grids, move the power between areas, manage the grid much better. So, I mean, there is some light at the end of the tunnel with some of these things. So, smart transportation, we are still implementing. We are moving to about 15 sites. The intelligent video surveillance, we've done 500. We are moving to 2,000 across different areas. So Lagos is on its way. And then with the fiber optic implementation as well, there is some movement in that regard.
All right, thank you. My big takeaway from your last answer is that if anybody in the crowd has received one of those automated text messages about the bill after running a red light, welcome to your smart city of Lagos. So for Lagos, what's the next step? What's the next big goal for the digital economy? Say for the next 5-6 years, where does Lagos want to be?
So there's a lot that we need to do, and sometimes it gives me sleepless nights just, trying to wrap my head around what we need to do. But two things I think are needed in the immediate. Number one, we need to train people. Technology talent. As you all know, we are losing a lot of people. And so how do we not just train, but incentivize them to stay? And some of it is out of our hands. Some of it is general economic issues across the country. But how do you even make it a little bit easier from a technology perspective, right? And it's some of the policies we want to pass. So if you are a technology talent and you stay in the country, how do we make it easier for you to pay less taxes, for instance? Or how do we make it easier for you to be able to do remote jobs, and things like that? So it's about frameworking a sustainable talent acceleration plan. I think that is number one on the agenda. Number two is digital government, right? I think it's high time Lagos starts speaking to its citizens digitally, right? Especially in the form of government-to-citizen services, e-government, electronic permit applications, things like that. So that's something that, as of today, in fact, once I get off this stage, I'm going for a meeting on how we digitize our entire enterprise, right? So those are immediate priorities for Lagos, for me today, and in 5 years, we don't want you to be talking to government officials, just be talking to computers, right? That's my goal.
I also wanted to ask, a big part of reaching these goals is trust. Like you mentioned, and we're joking backstage about how there's a general distrust of government. How do you leapfrog that? How do you, because if you talk about technology and you talk about Lagos, it's impossible for someone not to remind you about a ban. So how do you get around that? How do you get around and win the trust of people as you try to reach these goals?
Yeah, I think that trust issue is a moving goalpost, and I would say a big part of the issue is also on the side of government. We don't engage properly, and even during the engagement, there's no good faith, between the actors, the government thinks, at least from his perspective, this is the right thing to do. The private sector is like, why are you disturbing my business? And there's no benefit of the doubt between both. I mean, government guys have a ton of things to mull over. There's lots of factors to consider. I mean, you and I were talking about the Okada ban, at the time. And, what some of the government officials were dealing with were, look, there were actual areas in Lagos asking the government to actually ban Okadas. Hundreds of thousands of people that would show up at the lawmaker's office and like, look, man, my son died from this, and stuff like that, and these are voters as well. And then, of course, there's private sector. Don't ban, there's growth. So there are lots of things to weigh. So I tell a lot of people, look, why don't you become the governor for 2 weeks and let's see how your own decisions fare? It's not very easy. So I think there needs to be more engagement. There needs to be good faith on both parts. And of course, I'm sure a lot of things I said, a lot of people didn't know about them. It's forums like this that we have the opportunity to speak and to just engage, make it a more open and honest conversation. And I know government is not doing a good job of that. And we need to have more narratives and storytelling about, okay, this is what it took to get to this decision. This is how it came about. These were the people that contributed, much more transparency in that decision-making process. I think, yes, that's one thing.
Thank you very much. I do hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much, Commissioner. This was a great, great, great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.